Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. In the last parts, we did a couple things around the world, saw Ocarina nearly burned to the ground, before traveling back in time to find ourselves here in the bottom of the well, and now, even though we've actually gotten the thing we need to get here, the Lens of Truth, we're still going to be exploring around the bottom of the well a bit, because I do want to get all the chests here, just so I can feel like I got everything in all the dungeons, because this place does technically count. It's got a map, it's got a compass, it's got, I think, 3 gold skull shells off the top of my head. And that's actually about it of importance. Most of the other chests in this area are rupees, for hearts, or in the case you lose it to one of the few fire keys in here, I believe, a Deku shield. Also, I'd like to note, why is there a poison well, or a poison pool in the undead in the sewer system of Kakariko? That doesn't seem like it'd be healthy in any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I guess technically speaking, the well's main system probably only works through the main parts of the well. Probably doesn't fall down here just based off the water's flow. But at the same time, there could also just be a door that blocks it all off too. Am I thinking too hard about a children's fantasy game? Yes, I am. I either overthink things in life or I underthink. There's seldom the appropriate amount of thinking in my life. Whether or not that's a problem depends on the moment-to-moment basis. Now, one thing I really do have to give the bottom of the well is that while I'm not the biggest fan of it structurally, I really do like the music here, but for different reasons than most dungeon music in this game. Whereas, I know I've said it before a couple times that I don't like the dungeon music too much. But there's just something about this song that feels like it belongs more almost in a Silent Hill game. Not quite there. It's missing some of the more urban technology sounds that Silent Hill games have, don't get me wrong. But it has the right atmosphere for that, or like Fatal Frame, and it's just excellent. It's weird to think that a game beloved by so many kids can have a song that's honestly pretty scary sounding. I mean, I'm pretty null to it at this point, but I remember being sufficiently creeped out by this place and this place, actually. That's it. And the next dungeon, despite having very similar musical theming and visual theming, didn't creep me out quite nearly as much. In fact, the Temple of Time creeped me out more as a kid than the Shadow Temple. And I mean that unironically, because the chanting in the Temple of Time theme, I remember distinctly as a kid thinking, that's some guy watching me from the sky, or some shit along those lines. The way children think is incredibly interesting to me, as the irrationality has a certain rationality to it. If that makes sense. Whoa, frame rate drops. That happens a couple times in here. I want to say it's probably because of the giant bubble that's roaming the outer rim of the area. And the fire generates might just be causing some problems with my recorder. We do want to come in here, though, to get the compass. And you can see there's now quite a few chests still left in here. Again, most of these are either small keys or rupees, as they just happen to be in the same room as the few gold skull shells in the area. Exploring this area further, though, is also one of the reasons I tend to not go for true 100% runs of this game more often than not. Usually, I, for 100%, only go for all the heart pieces, if even. And it's mostly just because exploring this area for the last 3 Skulltulas, and by that I mean the only 3 Skulltulas, isn't hard, it's just time-consuming and tedious to me. It's a shame, too, because I feel like this area could have been really expanded upon to be really interesting, because they have unique rooms like this, where we have Gibdos first off. These are just re-deads in bandage wraps, essentially. I think they might have more HP, I honestly forget. And I forget if you hit them with Din's fire if they just become re-deads. I think I'm thinking of the 2D games with that. But in this room, if you light a torch, the respective coffin it's next to opens up. Often there's keys in there. There could also be re-deads or Gibdos outright. We want to open the one on the southwestern corner, though, as it contains a small key we need. There's really cool rooms like this that aren't anywhere else in the game, and I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities in this area. It makes me wonder if, in development, this just outright was going to be what the Shadow Temple was going to be like, or if these were concepts they removed because they figured the Shadow Temple was getting too big. It's kind of like how, if I'm recalling correctly, wasn't there plans for there to be a proper third water dungeon in Wind Waker, but they cut it for time purposes, which is why you just go to that one island where you're supposed to meet that giant fish dude, and it's just completely wrecked, and then you have to go get the bombs and head back to Outset. I recall that being a thing. Honestly, there's so much cut content and theories about the Zelda series, it's hard to keep track of sometimes which one was an actual theory that Nintendo confirmed they cut for stuff, or if it's just a fan theory that gained some serious traction because people like doing that. Especially with Breath of the Wild, because, hot damn, there's a lot of lore in that game that's buried deep, and some of it's really cool, some of it's just kind of there, like the whole, I think it was a Zeltic theory about the hidden temple where you get the Tunic of the Wild, when you get all the shrines done, being the leftovers of the city from Skyward Sword, which also really cool. Makes me wonder what Breath of the Wild 2 is going to have in that regard for background details, confirming prior lore, so on and so forth. There's a lot I'm looking forward to for that sequel, but I'm wondering how, if they're going to keep it as open-ended as the first game. My big want is if they can finally add some actual, like, usable items beyond the Sheikah Slate items, and have some legitimate dungeons. Because doing that with the Breath of the Wild mechanics, as they are, could be fantastic. Also, get used to seeing this texture. We're going to see it a bit more later on this part. Kind of creepy, but then again, this entire area is. Also, I recommend heading right now, because there's that other chest I can get, which is the final chest in the area that I do get. Oh no, there's no path! Yes, there is. I am glad that, as long as you know the game well enough, I think you can just completely skip the Lens of Truth, as any item that you need to see with it, its collision is always there, as you can see, so you can just walk on top of this kind of thing. You can even grab the chests, as I showed off last part, as long as you know they're there. Because I know some games, particularly worse games, would have made it so that you needed to have the Lens of Truth to either walk on these platforms or actively grab those chests. Or at least that having the Lens of Truth would have triggered a flag, causing the collision on them to activate if they weren't there beforehand, so in the case you entered an area ahead of time, you couldn't actively do anything with it. But I like that this game kept the ability for you to do all that, even if you don't have the item. And that's something I'm glad Majora's Mask kept as well. There are technically some things you need the Lens of Truth to trigger. I'm thinking of one particular place in a few parts where you activate the Lens of Truth and then the flag is triggered. But that is the only time I think the game does that off the top of my head. By the way, don't fall down most of the pits here. It's why you want to just kind of be careful and follow, like, the water path around. As you might remember earlier on in the part, I went through the Silver Rupee room. If you fall down any of the pits across the bottom of the well, you're sent back to that room, and I think you have to get the 5 silver rupees again. I say I think, because I can't remember the last time I fell down twice in a single playthrough. I remember I've seen LPs where people do that, but I don't think I've done that in a while. Why? Because I'm overly cautious and keep turning on and off the Lens of Truth. Though, unfortunately, a little abuse that you can no longer, or no, that you rather just can't do, period, in Ocarina, that you can do in Majora's Mask, is the Lens of Truth, when you activate it, this circle just kind of pops up and the red border around the screen happens. In Majora's Mask, the border has an animation where it encloses in around Link, and while it's doing that, it doesn't eat up magic power. So in Majora's Mask, if you just mash the C button, you have the Lens of Truth map to on and off, you never consume any magic. It's super busted. But it's also really helpful because the Mask of Truth is, Lens of Truth is a bit odd in Majora in that you get it so much earlier, in relative to the game's length at least, but you use it for so much less. Oh no, my shield is gone. Give me that back, please. I need it. I actually would really like that back, if you could please. Just die. Likes have a lot of HP. It doesn't help that the Kokiri sword, which now in my hands kind of looks more like a dagger, does jack and shit for damage. If I'm recalling correctly, at least, though, This is the final gold skull shell in the bottom of the well. The only reason we're going to be here for another minute or so is there's 2 more chests after this, both of which I could have very easily grabbed at this point. I just always forget to because they're not along the pathway, technically, to any of the Skulltulas, as the Skulltulas are all in other places. I say, immediately remembering that I passed by the other one earlier and could have very easily grabbed it, and the one on the top left is... The one on the top left is actually a good hint for things to come in the Shadow Temple, now that I think about it, as you may have noticed around the bottom of the well, there are... Oh no, my shield. There are bunches of dirt in a bunch of the corners in the rooms, particularly on the bottom floor. However, there are some that have cracks in them you can bomb. On the top left corner is a chest that's just like that, covered by dirt with a crack in it. Which means that that rock is completely, that dirt is completely solidified and compressed into rock, which I don't even want to begin to think about how long that would take. Assuming that is rock and not necrosticized flesh or some bullshit like that. I don't even think I said that right. Oh well. Also notable thing about any particular holes that you can only see with the Lens of Truth, their collision's a bit odd in that their ledges don't have any jump programming on them. So if you fall off a ledge, even with the Lens of Truth on, that you should be jumping off, you can't jump off of it. Also, now I just cut back to the center room here because this is where the final chest is. And now I'm going to be cutting out of this place because we're about a solid minute out from the entrance. So I'm just going to walk in that general direction and then jump cut to my next destination, which is not quite yet the Temple of Time. You see, there's one particular minigame shop I haven't shown off here in Hyrule Castle Town Market, despite the fact you've been able to access it for a while. It is this door right over here, which I believe is only open at night, which is why it's night. Welcome to the treasure box shop. Open the chest and, surprise, if you find a key inside, you'll be able to advance. Left or right, try your luck. 10 rupees to play. Do you want to try it? Sure. Alright, so this is the treasure box shop. Unlike previous Zelda games where you just have to randomly open a treasure chest and hope you get the item you want, this is a 50-50 shot for a key or a rupee, the color of which is dependent on the room you're in. There's, I think, 5 or 6 rooms. And that means, mathematically speaking, your chances get much lower every time you go into the next room. I want to say that ends you with around a 1 to 3% chance to get it without the Lens of Truth, as the Lens of Truth allows you to completely bypass the luck element and see directly into the chests, which is which. This is hinted towards in the game by the specific gossip stone I talked to after I got the Mask of Truth in front of the Temple of Time, who says that glasses are not allowed here at the treasure chest shop because cheating. I have only ever seen a person get this without using the Lens of Truth once, and they got pretty hype. I think it was a Twitch stream somewhere along the line. It's unlikely, it's possible, you shouldn't do it like that. Once you get to the golden room, you're at the end. And our reward for this is the start of the last heart container we can get from heart pieces. This is heart piece number 33, I think. Whoa, frame rate. Calm down, recorder. You're fine, baby. It's fine. But our business as Child Link is now concluded for another bit now. So let's head back to Adult Link and play the Nocturne of Shadow because it's the only way you can access the Temple of the Shadow Temple. Compared to other dungeons where there are ways to reach the entrance without using the warp song, this one is placed in such a place. The entrance to this temple, rather, is placed in such a location that you can only reach it with the Nocturne of Shadow. And I think I understand why completely. Because you need to use Din's Fire to enter the Shadow Temple. And since you can get Din's Fire relatively early in the game, that means you could also potentially enter the Shadow Temple really early in the game. If you didn't, what's the word? Have that fence there, really. And here we are, right in front of the Sheikah symbol. Get on this platform and use Din's Fire on top of the Fire Medallion image for some reason. This is the one time in the game Din's Fire is required. So if you didn't get this yet for some reason, head back to being Child Link and go right over to the Hyrule Castle area and bomb the rock over there and go to that Great Fairy's Fountain. With that, welcome to the Shadow Temple. This place is going to make a lot of use of your Lens of Truth So I recommend having that almost constantly on your C buttons, potentially even replacing the Ocarina. The shadow will yield only to the one with the Eye of Truth, handed down in Kakariko Village. Well, it's a good thing I have that already, isn't it? And now there are two paths we can take here, either directly in front of us, which we can't really get to yet, or we can see that there's a false wall hidden over here. Honestly, I feel that the Shadow Temple has the highest amount of item usage out of any of the main temples in the game, particularly for the Lens of Truth. One who gains the Eye of Truth will be able to see what is hidden in the darkness, such as a hidden wall right here and wherever there's a glowing skeleton eye, really. Shadow Temple. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. Hidden walls, hazards in the floor, even hidden enemies. There are a lot of things you're going to be using the Lens of Truth on in the dungeon. So I actually recommend heading to the potion shop before coming here, just in case, to get perhaps a green potion to restore your magic power in the case you're running low, which is very possible unless you're just spamming the C button to reduce the usage of magic whenever possible. You're also going to be encountering a lot of pretty powerful enemies in here in terms of their HP counts. A lot of Redeads, a couple of Gibdos, a refight against an enemy refight only last part, and a surprisingly high amount of Stalfos for a dungeon this late in the game, as we haven't seen them since the Forest Temple, but because they're technically dead, I guess they belong here. Also, I'm only now realizing that the walls in this room aren't dirt, those are a bunch of skulls. Whoa! I have been playing this game for about 20 years and I've never noticed that. That's disturbing. It's always funny to me what you can and won't notice when you're playing a game because your attention is elsewhere. Because I'm not actively playing the game right now, my attention's in a different place, so I'm able to notice details like that. It's really cool what you can notice just from doing LPs like this. What is hidden in the darkness? Tricks full of ill will. You can't see the way forward. Dang, you sound like my subconscious before a test in college. A nice little detail that this area did have in Ocarina of Time 3D, I believe, is that all of the little skulls in the wall were actually given proper, like, 3D depth, and I don't know why I find that really cool. I'm not sure about a lot of the other rooms because it's been a while, and oh, hi again, Dead Hand. We had to fight Dead Hand again, only this time I can kill it a lot more quickly as I have bigger weapons. Though a notable purpose as well that you have with the Lens of Truth in this particular fight is that if you use the Lens of Truth before summoning the Dead Hand by getting grabbed by one of the hands, you can see a direct dark spot where it is. And if you place a bomb on top of it, you can summon it without having to get grabbed by one of the hands. This is something that took me a number of years to figure out even as a kid, but I'm glad because getting touched by the hands just squakes me out. Like, for instance, what are these red spots supposed to be on it? Is that blood? I don't know. It's creepy. Although I always have liked the Dead Hands animations in one regard. Beyond very creepy being, that's not how you grammar, but oh, the K. One of my Petra from Three Houses. I've always thought the N64 was better than the PlayStation in one regard, and that's that I think the first-party games for the system had much smoother animations despite, at times, lower frame rates than the PlayStation counterparts. Like, I love Crash Bandicoot, but its animations are much more cartoony and sudden than Ocarina, which are much more smooth and deliberate. But now we got the hover boots. With these mysterious boots, you can hover above the ground. The downside, no traction. You can even use these to walk up for short periods where there is no solid ground. Be brave and trust in the boost. Yeah, that was technically the mini-boss. We already have the dungeon item. However, just like the iron boots, it's an item you have to take on and off over and over again. Less so than the iron boots, though, because you can keep these on for more or less a lot of the rest of the dungeon and be completely fine. I'm not even going to be cutting out the menus where I take them on and off because it happens relatively that infrequently. But yeah, these, you got Luigi physics while you're running around with the hover boots. But because of that, you can now hover over areas where there are no ground, or completely smooth your descent in areas where there is rougher ground. For instance, now we can get onto the tongue across the way, but first we need to make this guy's beak face the skull that's actually a skull. If you use the Lens of Truth, only one of these skulls will still appear. That's the one where you need to point it. It's usually one of these two on the left in my case, but I think it's randomly generated. But point it the right way, and that door across the way should open. There we are. And now let's check out the hover boots. Just roll on over, and there you go. It lasts about 2 seconds, if even. But it is enough space for you to, especially if you have some momentum from like doing a roll beforehand, reach any platform that the game needs you to. Don't bother bombing this Beamos, by the way, as not only does it have more HP than most Beamoses for some reason, it'll also come back really frequently, as we're going to be coming back and forth in this room at least 2 or 3 times. For instance, right now, if you check with the Lens of Truth, the walls on the sides are fake. Not so much the one in front of you, but the one on the side definitely is. Gibdos, by the way, I think I even did it earlier, I just didn't mention it. They are also susceptible to the Sun Song to stun them, just like the Redeads have been. Stop doing that. It's weird how unthreatening the Gibdos and Redeads have gotten outside of their pure damage potential as I've aged, as that very bone-piercing shriek is still out of context scary. I'm surprised it hasn't been used in more jump scares for memes. But maybe it's just because the Redeads themselves as well, the Gibdos, just aren't as scary looking as they used to be to kid me, that it just kind of loses the impact. Compared to maybe the Redeads in Wind Waker, which are still objectively terrifying to me. Either way, with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 28, we're going to continue our trek through the Shadow Temple. I forget if we beat it in the process, though, off the top of my head. I'll be real with you. See you guys then.